Like when we say they went scorched earth, I mean they went fully scorched earth. They were like, and things were done
like
that
Disney
made it
villain proportions. Like...
Hello, 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 and welcome to Well Shit. It really is that simple. I'm Claire.
And I'm Serena. On this podcast, we help you to understand about your 12 universal needs, why they are currently not being well met,
How to meet them in ways that work for you, and how to consistently do so in quick, easy, and simple ways that fit seamlessly into your life.
We'll also help you to understand how doing so will have a positive ripple effect in literally every area of your life.
If you like what you hear, come and join the conversation in our Facebook group.
And enjoy the show.
Hello, hello, hello.
Hey, everyone.
So the good news about doing this episode on unsupportive discomfort is that we can circle back to a couple of things I forgot to mention at the end of the last episode on supportive discomfort. So we have the ability to kind of segue nicely into this. One of the things that I realized when we finished recording the last episode that I'd forgotten to mention is that initially, even supportive discomfort can seem like it will be impossible to tolerate. Like it feels like especially when we've been conditioned to prioritize our comfort so much in our society, and that comfort is like the pinnacle of if you're uncomfortable, that's terrible. So like if you're so used to like protecting your comfort, and then you put like a little pinky toe outside of it, it's like, oh my God, what the hell is that? So it's one of those things that initially it can seem really tough to begin with. And so it's okay to kind of give yourself grace in that process, but the better you meet your needs and the more you practice going into that space, the more you're going to tolerate it, and not just tolerate it. Eventually you're going to welcome it, because eventually you're going to be like, I know this process and I know this part's a little bit sticky. But I also know like on the other side of it, this is going to get really fun. Like this is going to sound like a really odd thing to kind of compare this to, but it's a little bit like the experience for me of being on a roller coaster. Like when you are like in certain roller coasters, but like when you're in that like slow anticipation of that, like I don't like that. Like that's the bit where I'm like, I remember years ago we were on a family holiday, and we were on this massive roller coaster. I think it was the biggest roller coaster I'd ever been on until that point. And I was sat next to my sister, and as we're going up, I'm like, we're still going up. She's like, I know. I'm like, can I get off yet? No, that's it. You're locked in now. This is it. And I'm like, we're still going up. We're still going up. We're still going up. And I'm like, by the time I reach the top, I like my insides are like knotted up. And I'm like, oh my God, what the hell is this going to be like? Now, the initial drop on that one was a little bit uncomfortable as well. I'm not going to lie. I have this thing where if I'm on a roller coaster and I'm going through like a drop, I have to scream, because it's the only way that I can get like the sensation out of my body, like that tension in my system. Like the scream is how I release it. We walked off this roller coaster, and my sister was in fits of laughter. My mum and dad were like, what's going on? Dawn's like, she ran out of scream partway down the first drop. And I was like, and it was so true. And I got 2/3 of the way down and there was nothing left inside me. So that was a little uncomfortable as well. But the rest of it was fantastic. And like that, like, but you could only get to like all the swoops and curves and everything by going up the tall, big climb, because that's what gives you the momentum to get you around the rest of the roller coaster. And not only that, but like now we went on the same roller coaster since, and I'm like, oh, I know what this is like. Like I got like the more I did it, the more I was like, okay, I know what's on the other side of this. This is going to be fun. So the more you get to that point where you welcome that feeling, because you know the process, and your system knows the process, and your system knows that on the other side of this, because of the specific kind of discomfort we're feeling, it's going to be worth it, and there's going to be this huge benefit to it. Because the thing about it is like, it's not a bad thing to be uncomfortable unless it's because your needs are going to be seriously compromised or it's serious threat, like in the long term. And that's what we're kind of getting to today, which is that unsupportive discomfort is the discomfort of our needs being compromised by a situation, and excessively so. And the reason that this is uncomfortable is because our needs have gone from either being somewhat met or protected to being negatively impacted significantly. And I said it's either like it's a huge significant negative impact, or it's a negative impact that's going to last for a prolonged period of time, or it's a negative impact for which there is going to be no benefit. That's the other piece of the puzzle on this. So getting supported with discomfort in situation where it's supportive, beneficial, and supportive for us to do so, like healthy for us to do so, is good for us. But it's just as important to be able to identify the situations when it is not. And what do you do in those situations when you find yourself in that unsupportive discomfort? And there are so many examples of situations in which this is a discomfort that is not supportive to me. It's a discomfort that is going to compromise me way more than it is going to support me. And so it's, I mean, literally, I'm like trying to think, like, my brain has got like 380 examples. It's all trying to like process and get out of my mouth at the same time. But I think that one of the biggest examples for me with this is that moment where I feel unsafe. And it's not like, oh my God, like, it's not like, okay, this is like a horror movie and I'm like in the house by myself and the phone's ringing. There's a dude going, I'm wondering who I'm looking at right now. Like that's not the kind of unsafe. It's that everything seems fine. Like there's nothing like blatantly explicit which indicates that you are unsafe, but there is something about that situation that twists your insides, that has you kind of feeling something about this feels off. Like and a lot of the time that I've experienced that, it's when I'm around people who are not good for me to be around. And I maybe don't know that because I haven't known them a long time, or I've only just met them, or they're people who I've only seen one side of them. But there's something, and it's that kind of, that's like, it comes back to those damn niggles are coming in again. If you don't know what a niggle is, go back and look at clearing niggles. But it's that niggling feeling inside that won't let up, and where it's like, something about this. I mean, and it's funny because I've had situations in my life where it's like everything is like, nothing about this seems like a good idea. I mean, I used to be I used to be a vocalist, and I was looking to try to get into the music industry many years ago. And I sent off a demo CD, as it was back then, to a bunch of different places. And I will never forget, there was one guy, he called me and he was like, yeah, so we're looking for and we're like trying to get this, like we think you'll be fantastic for this. And I was like, oh, okay. And he was like, yeah, I'd love for you to come to this hotel and we want to try you to try a bunch of different looks to see what look is going to be the best fit for you. And I'm like, okay, guy I don't know, trying to get me to come to a hotel in which he wants me to change clothes. And as somebody he's interested in as a singer, all he cares about is what I'm wearing. Like, every alarm bell, flashing warning light is going like, danger, do not, like, and I was like, yeah, thanks, I'm good, bye. Like, I mean, and that was like, that wasn't easy. Like, everything in my conditioning tells me that is not a good situation to get myself into. I think that more often though, when this unsupportive, and don't get me wrong, in that supportive, in that moment, unsupportive discomfort, like running through my veins, I can feel it in every fiber of my being. But I think this is the time that I really notice this more than ever, is when there's nothing blatantly obvious that tells you this isn't a good idea, but something in your system is saying, I don't like this. And I don't know why I don't like this, but I know I don't like this. And it's funny because I've got a pretty good sense about people just generally. But then we have other people around us who have got even better sense. And I remember we've got there's somebody who's a good friend of ours on the island, and we had somebody who was spending a lot of time around us. She'd become a friend of ours, and somebody who was like part of our world for a while. And don't get me wrong, there were signs about her where you're going like, oh, I can see that, I see you. But there were also, like, I mean, as Serena shared in a previous episode, when Serena and I first met, Serena was a very different person when we first met. And there were some things I'm like, okay, those are things I could see that were there in Serena when we first met as well. Now, the difference was Serena wanted to learn and understood and did things a little differently. This person had no interest in doing that. But I was like, part of me was like, okay, I can see why this person is the way that they are. And I can see that. And I will never forget. And it was so funny because this person who was a friend of ours was like desperate for this other person's approval. And it was kind of hilarious. And I will never forget, there was this one night where we were out all together, and she was with us for a second, and then she disappeared somewhere else. And this friend of ours went, I don't like that bitch. And it was so funny. It was like, and it was so funny because, like, if you know her, she's a very no nonsense person, and like she will just call it as she sees it. There's no airs, there's no graces. That is just who she is. And I was like, oh shit, because this is like one of my people like saying this to me, and I kind of felt for this person, and I could see she'd had some challenges in her life, and I wanted to see if I could, like, if there was a potential. And I was like, oh, and I was like, I said, I think she's just very insecure. And she's trying too hard, and she's trying to prove herself, all of which were true. And the irony is, later that night, this person had given me a ride home, and she was like, oh, that person hugged me tonight, she likes me. And I was like, okay, yeah. I didn't say anything more than that, because I was like, because somebody who's insecure, I didn't want to go, actually, no, she doesn't like you at all. And I was like,
well, and I wonder if she hugged her, or knowing the two parties, whether
the other way around,
the other one hugged, and yes. It's like
against her will kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it was so interesting because I had this person's back, and I spoke for her, and I stood up for her when even in this situation, I kind of stood up for her, and I was like, I think she's just had a hard time of it. I think she's very insecure. She's like trying to prove herself, blah, 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 blah. I can understand why you feel that way, because she's not somebody, like, if you try around her, like, forget it. Like, she just wants people to be themselves. And if you are yourself and you are a good, decent human being, she'll love you. That's just who she is.
And ironically, because like I said, the person that we were befriending at the time, there were a lot of similarities to how I was. Like there was a lot of similarities, and we're like, there is hope. Like, and we could see a little bit, like, it wasn't like we were getting all these red flags. We're like, no. There were things that we were comparing to the experience that we've both been in with me.
Yeah.
And with that specific person that was like, I don't like her, they weren't a huge fan of me to begin with, because I wasn't solid in myself. It was about attention grabbing. It was
approval,
all about my unmet needs. And even with that, I was like, with the person that wanted that attention from them, it's like, no, I went through that too. Like, they're just very cautious. But it both stuck in both of our heads, because this isn't somebody, like, this is somebody that's like another mother to us. Like
family.
It's not just,
absolutely, yes,
yeah, like not just a random person we see. Like, they are very important to us, and we're like, she sees something we don't.
Or I think the thing is that I do think she saw something that we didn't. But I also think that she didn't see the things and the potential that we did see, because she hadn't gone through that process with you in the same way. And I'm a great proponent in giving people a chance and supporting them if they've had a hard time, and letting them step into who they truly are, or would have been without that trauma, and like helping people support them with their healing. I mean, literally, it's what I do for a living. So like for me, I was like, and it was so interesting because not a few weeks later, the entire thing blew up in our faces. And it was another one, like if you listen to the story that we told like a couple of episodes ago, it was a very similar situation because this person had done some really crappy stuff. And I was like, hey, this, just so you know, this isn't okay with me. And I'm like, I'm not like you've done these terrible things, but I'm like, just like, if I want to be close to you and I want to be able to like do this in a way that works for both of us. And it was so funny because they disappeared off the face of the earth for a hot second. And then when they came back, it was like nothing had happened. And I was like, we were like, hold on a second. And then they were supposed to come and meet with us. And then they just last minute were like, sorry, can't do it. And it was like, and I was like, okay, let me explain to this person. I'm like, okay, I get that we've all got stuff that's going on right now. We're all busy and we're having a hard time, like with the capacity that we have. Like I would love to talk to you about this. Can we have a conversation and figure this out? And the conflict avoidant came in at that point in time. And also the aspect of this person that our friend had seen. And I mean, she went full scorched earth. And it was so interesting because obviously I don't want to be somebody who's like, oh no, I'm absolutely not trusting anybody until they've proven themselves. I want to stay open. But there were moments in that where I started to feel that unsupportive discomfort. And I was like, is it just because of what this person said to me? Is it these things and everything? And the truth of the matter is it presented itself. It unfolded beautifully in front of me. I'm like, oh, that's why. Okay, cool. We now know that this is not a person who's going to be a part of our inner circle. That's okay. And there have been numerous instances of these where if I've met a guy at a bar, or I've met a couple, or met a new person, and I'm like, something about this person that doesn't feel in alignment. Another great example was there was somebody who I met on this island years ago, and they seemed lovely and everyone seemed to love them. And there's just this little feeling inside of me. I'm like, something doesn't feel right. And I didn't follow that feeling. And I was like, maybe I'm just being judgmental. Maybe I'm a little like battle worn from some of the experiences I've had. And so I'm a little bit like I'm like a little gun shy and just trying to like protect myself and everything. And started to get to know this person, and they seemed lovely on the surface. And then I found out something fundamental about them that was a massive conflict of values. And I was like, that's what it was. And it wasn't that they're a bad person necessarily. They just weren't in alignment with me. And they weren't somebody who it was safe for me to be around as a result. And I don't mean like physically safe. I mean like emotionally, like I can just be myself and just know that I'm among people who are the same as me, kind of thing.
I find a lot of times, especially with the unsupportive discomfort, we end up gaslighting ourselves in these situations, especially when empathy is involved, because we had a lot of empathy for the person that Claire was referring to that went scorched earth on everybody. And like there was empathy for the situation that they'd been in. There's empathy. We'd both been there in certain aspects of it. It's like, if I didn't have Claire, would I be where I am today? No, like unequivocally, hands down, no, it just wouldn't have been possible. And I thought Joe was chiming in. He was just coughing. I was like, sorry. I was like, that would be a place to jump in. Yeah. Yes. So like when there is that emotional involvement, there's been situations that like there have been multiple situations where the empathy, where the belief that people can change, the belief that they want to change, but they're still not showing you. They're not doing the actions, but you're like, no, I can feel it. I can see it. But there is something in you going, but, and it's not just, oh, I'm uncomfortable because like, you know, there's change going on, or it's like, I don't want to, I'm uncomfortable because this is going to create a conflict, and I don't want to be conflict avoidant, but I don't want to step into the, you know, the conflict space. And that like just, we get into our heads and we're like, no, it's fine. No, you don't see that red flag. That's more of like a salmon. Like, we can deal with salmon. Like, and it's,
Yeah.
we teach this stuff and we find ourselves, and it's like, we find out different tactics for people to like different
Oh yeah.
different behavior tactics constantly because of this.
And especially the more you understand about needs, this can be even more so, because you understand why somebody is behaving the way that you are. Like, I mean, as I've talked about in previous episodes, half the time when I'm having conversations with people, their needs are screaming at me while they are talking. And I'm like, oh, it's a lot of unmet needs. And I see the need. So I'm like, I get it. Like, I can see that's your value need talking. I can see that's your security need talking. And I know why your value need has been compromised, because you went through this horrific trauma. All right. Like, and this is the thing, is like, it's so important for us to recognize and remember that as adults, we have responsibility how we respond to the traumas that we have been through. Like, are they our fault? No, but we do have a responsibility for healing them so that we do not pass the consequences of them onto other people or other situations around us. And that's one of the things that's really important to say at this point. Like, if you're a long time listener, like, it's very easy to go, well, I can see the need. Well, yeah, you can see the need, but they're choosing how to respond to that unmet need. And yes, the choosing might be somewhat to do with their conditioning, but also people are aware. I mean, this person is absolutely aware of the fact that they are trying to do harm. Like, when we say they went scorched earth, I mean, they went fully scorched earth. They were like, and things were done
like
that
Disney villain proportions. Like, honestly,
I think Disney villain might be a bit too kind to them. I think like full on. Like, I mean, like,
yeah,
the villains outside of Disney, I mean, Disney villains are bad enough, but kind of some of them you're like, okay, like, I can see like their origin story and everything. And I think that's the thing. Like, if you see, like, especially like there's so much of this now, when you see the humanity in somebody, when they are making poor choices, you have empathy for them still. And so it's like, it's the reason that like so many, like, there's so many things that are now like really fucked up when it comes to like movies and TV shows and everything, because you're seeing the humanity of the person who is doing harm. And so part of you is also empathizing with them, but you're like, but they're like, I mean, a great example of this is like the movie The Joker, or if you look at something like a TV show like Dexter, like, he's a serial killer, but you have empathy for him because you see the things, you see life through his lens, you see things through his experience and the things that he's been through. And that's part of the challenge with this, is that, yeah, I mean, this is somebody who went full on into their villain era in front of us, like, with people we knew. So obviously we knew what was happening. And part of us was like, I mean, I didn't feel such empathy for them, that they're obviously in pain that they're behaving this way. It would be kind of comical because it's like, that was a choice. Okay. And because you understand the needs and because you understand their story, because you see their humanity, you have empathy for them. And that empathy sometimes has you giving more grace than is appropriate when that unsupportive discomfort shows up. And when that unsupportive discomfort shows up, most of us will go through an experience where we experience this a few times before we kind of get the message. Once you get the message, you understand in those situations, you don't want to get comfortable. You want to get out. And you want to, at the very least, set boundaries or manage the situation appropriately. And it was like, this example that we're talking about, the person we're talking about, is a very good example in a lot of ways, because this is somebody who wanted attention. That's exactly what they wanted. And it would have been so easy for us to have been out, like, talking to people, being like, oh yeah, this is what's going on. And but that's exactly what was wanted. I'm like, no, we need to starve the oxygen from this. We need to not talk about it. We need to not mention it, not raise to it. Just do us.
Yeah, I see your scorched earth. I'm planting flowers here.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly. Let's get the hose out. Let's like put some fertilizer down. And not in a like doing it for them and for their benefit, but we're
mhm.
just not feeding the flames of what is going on in that situation. Now, sometimes there are those moments where you see it, you see the consequences, you see the downfall, and you're like, oh, okay, I see where that went. That wasn't. And once you are in that pattern and you've seen that pattern occur a few times, you start to notice the feeling of unsupportive discomfort before you see the consequence, before you see the reason for it. And that's a point where it's like, this is where it's so important for us to get really clear on what that feels like in our system. And I mean, we've talked in the past about like your intuition and using your gut and everything. Now, bear in mind, like some people think about this as some kind of woo-woo supernatural force. Like no shade if that's what you believe. And some people believe that it's just our subconscious being able to be aware of so many things our conscious isn't aware of. So we get a sense of something without our brain necessarily knowing why. And again, no shade if that's what you believe. It doesn't really matter what you feel around this, but it's about starting to hone and listen to and understand and trust that gut feeling, that when that gut feeling, and I talk about gut feeling because like for me that's what it is. Like I feel it like in like literally in my gut, like my kind of solar plexus area is exactly where I feel it when this sort of stuff comes up. But that gut feeling can also come in the terms of, it can come in the way of thoughts. Like if people don't have that kind of proprioception to be able to feel in their bodies in that way, it could be a physical sensation rather than like an emotional sensation. It could be an emotional sensation. It could be a thought process that only shows up in certain circumstances. You want to look for whatever the indicators are that your system is telling you something isn't right here. I mean, you might not see any red flags, but I'm waving the red flag.
Mhm.
Something about this feels red flaggish to me. And so we need to figure out how we're going to navigate this.
I don't remember what I ate for breakfast yesterday, but my conscious knows,
Subconscious?
subconscious. Thank you. All of a sudden, I was like, I'm not even saying the
I'm
right
trying
damn
the
word.
right word. I was like, hey, I
Yeah.
realized that midway through as well.
My subconscious is like, we've seen this pattern. We know this. And it is far beyond what my conscious memory is like, oh, yeah, I remember this, from this instance. And it's interesting because there have been instances where Claire and I have had like kind of a subconscious hit and we're like, ooh, red flag, don't really know why, but like, let's not. And then we start talking about it and we get into it and it's like, oh, that's the same as this and the same as this. And we saw this here and that's the same as this person. And we also saw this situation arise there. But in that moment, I wasn't thinking of these 5 situations, but my subconscious was like, you've been here, you've done that. It doesn't work. Like,
yeah, absolutely. And I think that like, so like how do we understand what the difference is between supportive discomfort and unsupportive discomfort? And like sometimes what can like a lot of the times when it's supportive discomfort, we know that it's going to be good for us to do that. Like logically, we can see that there is a benefit to this. We know what we're going to get to on the other side. And whether that is we create a closer relationship with somebody because we've had the uncomfortable conversation, or whether it is having the uncomfortable conversation has made it absolutely clear this is not somebody we need to be close with. And that's actually good for us to know because we now are able to put ourselves at the appropriate distance from that person. Or whether it's like, well, we know that we want to get to this place. And so the discomfort is a natural progression in that learning process. Whatever it is, a lot of the time our brain kind of knows. It's our body that's a little bit like, oh, this is uncomfortable. I don't, but our brain's like, yeah, but we know why. Like we know why we're uncomfortable because we're heading in a direction. When we're in that place where we need to get out, like we're in that, like we've got that unsupportive discomfort showing up, our body is normally telling us that it is not good for us. and our brain doesn't have like a clear, no, this is what we are supposed to be doing. Like that there's a purpose to this. If we can see the purpose to the discomfort, then there's a good chance that that's because it's supportive discomfort, because there's a strategic reason why it's worth going through that discomfort to get to the other side. If we, however, we are feeling uncomfortable and we can't see any reason for this, like it doesn't seem to make logical sense. I mean, obviously, if it's uncomfortable and we see there's a logical reason why it's uncomfortable because this is a bad idea, I mean, that's also a good example of like unsupportive discomfort, but that one we tend to be aware of. But it's a lot of the time it's when like it doesn't make sense. And and this is where it sometimes can be a tough learning curve with this, because when we're feeling uncomfortable, but we don't know why we're feeling uncomfortable, and there's no benefit to the discomfort, but logically there's a part of our brain going, yeah, but we shouldn't feel uncomfortable in this. That's where the self-gaslighting comes in. That's where it's like, but this is a nice person, or this is something I really want to do, or this is something like this is a place I've always wanted to visit, or this is like whatever it is. When we start trying to rationalize it, as opposed to going, no, we can see clearly that by going through this, we're going to get to that point, and that's where we're wanting to get to. If we're just like trying to talk ourselves into it because it doesn't feel right, but there's no real logical reason, if we're trying to find the reasons, if we're looking for the reasons, if we're trying to justify why this possibly, why it's fine, and it's not really that, like it's just a blip or whatever, that's where it's probably unsupportive discomfort. And there have been so many situations where like I can't tell you the number of places where I've walked into somewhere, and I was saying to a mutual friend of ours the other day, while I was having my bodywork session, I was saying like we're both very solid in our intuition, and there have been times where you and I have walked, like Serena and I have walked into a place, and I have walked straight back out, and Serena's like, and I'm like, nope, I don't know why, it's just a no. And because we've both been through this enough times now, both of us are like, okay, it's a nope then. And like the same thing, like there have been situations where from a logical standpoint, it would make sense for something to be done. Like I remember there was a situation where I'm like, I could really do with this being sorted out. And Serena's like, every time I think about it, it's like a no. And it's like both of us, and I'm like, if that's what your intuition is telling you, let's follow that, because going down that path is probably not going to be good for anyone involved. So let's trust that, because both of us have gone through this enough time. So when you kind of get used to that feeling, and what can help is like when you first start to do this and we first start to notice those, see if you can find the why. Now, the why may not present itself, and it's okay if it doesn't, but it can be very helpful when you have those like, that doesn't feel great. That doesn't feel great. And then later on, you're like, oh, I see. I see. Like, I get it now. Like the amount of times when I wanted to go somewhere for a night, and then I found out subsequently there was somebody there that I really didn't want to have to deal with. And I'm like, oh, that's why it wasn't the right thing to go. That's why it wasn't the right thing to do. There's been so many of these examples, like just in the time that we've known each other, where it's like, I don't know why, but something's saying no. And then later on we find something, it's like, oh, cool. Okay. And every single one of those, you want to kind of store it in the bank and be like, okay, there are reasons. We may not always know the reasons, but there are reasons. And once we can start to trust, okay, there's a reason here. And it might just be that, sometimes we've been into places, and I know that there've been situations where we walked into a bar and I've known immediately there's someone in there that's going to be trouble. Not because they're doing anything. There was something, and it could have been their body language. It could have been their energy. It could have been the way that they were looking. It could be what they were focused on in the room. It could be just some woo-woo sixth sense that I picked up that this person's going to start some shit. Like, who knows? I don't know. But what I do know is that more often than not, when I have that sense and I can't see, like, there's no justifiable reason for it. There's no like, okay, this is because it's going to get us somewhere. that's my warning sign. And that's the point where it's like, okay, where are the exits? Where are the boundaries? Like, what? It's like a great example of this actually is the where we were talking about. I think it was a couple of episodes ago when we were talking about being direct in terms of communication, and we were talking about the bar that Serena and I were in where we were chatting, and the person walked in. Now, when the person walked in, I wasn't sure whether it was the person from the night before who got in my personal space and was causing issues and what have you. But the very second I saw him, my entire system went, nope. And I'm like, and that was the reason I thought it was the guy from the night before, because the fact that my body was reacting the way that it was, I'm like, well, that would make sense if it was the guy from the night before. And then sure as it turned out that's exactly who it was. And so the more that you can kind of join the dots without needing to, it's like not like I have to be able to join the dots in order for this to be something I'm going to believe in. But the more you can start to trust that instinct within you and recognizing the difference between like, yeah, okay, my insides are tied up in knots, but that's because I'm about to confront a trauma that is very uncomfortable for me. And so it makes sense as to why I'm tied up in knots, and I'm choosing to go through that tied up in knots to get to the point where I no longer have to worry about the knots because I've healed from them. Like, that's a very different situation. And I'm tied up in knots and I feel like my head's on a swivel and I feel like the hair on the back of my neck is kind of standing up, and it's like something about this just feels off. I felt like,
and I think the more you practice, being in the supportive discomfort spaces, the more the unsupportive discomfort feeling is going to stand on, like I've found personally, at least, out. It stands out. There is a different feeling. I'm like, oh, like uncomfortable feels one way, supportive discomfort feels one way, and then like the unsupportive discomfort feels something totally different. And because I've been able to kind of go into these spaces where it's like, okay, yep, I can be uncomfortable with this, and this is what discomfort feels like, because I'm trying to get to that place beyond discomfort. And like Claire said, that just your body is like, nope, I don't know why, but just hard no on that one. You start to feel it, and it starts to kind of separate itself, because I can only imagine people are like, okay, so I'm supposed to take the nuance of discomfort and figure out whether it's supportive or unsupportive. And it's, as you start kind of practicing it, it's not as foreign as it may sound in this comparison. But when you start doing, like, start acknowledging where the support is, or where the discomfort is supportive or unsupportive, and looking back and recollecting on situations and being like, oh, this is why it was supportive, or oh, this is why it was unsupportive. You kind of train your being to be like, okay, we're looking for these red flags. These are, signs that, maybe this is good for me. Like, I find myself stepping into supportive discomfort now, because I'm like, okay, like, let's get through it.
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes like we get confused. More importantly, we gaslight ourselves because of our conditioning. Like, sometimes, like in our society, we're conditioned into believing that certain people are trustworthy, or certain people are safe. Like people who are older than us, for example, or people who hold certain positions or roles or responsibilities within our society. And so, because there's been such a conditioning around that, sometimes that can act in conflict with what we are feeling within our system. And this is reason it's so important to get to understand what it feels like in your system, and start to learn to listen to it, hear it, trust it, and act on it. Because there have been, I cannot count the number of times when, there are times where I haven't noticed this or I haven't listened to it and it's bit me in the ass. But I cannot count the number of times where I'm like, something just doesn't feel right. And the interesting thing about this is that it, like the extent to which, like the intensity of it, sometimes it's just a situation that's not going to serve you. It's not necessarily going to do you a lot of harm. It's just there's going to be no benefit to it, and it's going to be uncomfortable. So what's the point? And then other times it's like this. I'm sure there are times where this has literally saved my life, where I have not gone down a path which would have crashed and burned in lots of different ways, because I listened to it and because I cultivated that trust in it.
I'm thinking of a specific example where I was I had a feeling that something was off about a friendship I was in, and I was like, no, no. And there was a feeling of unsafety at some point in it. And I was like, I just don't feel safe. But I couldn't, at that point, I hadn't gone through the program. I couldn't really identify. I was like, started gaslighting myself. It's fine. It's fine. It's fine. Now, when I finally did just terminate this friendship, all of a sudden, that feeling of unsafety, that general feeling of unsafety went away. And I was like, I had been operating within that unsupportive discomfort for so long that I hadn't even realized that it was there, to the point of being like, I was just like, oh, that was, that seems kind of off, or, that feels a little weird.
Yeah.
And then when it just kind of was like, oh.
Well, and it's interesting how, like, sometimes there are indicators in your body as well. Like, sometimes you don't necessarily feel it, but I remember, like, when I went through my last breakup, I mean, in a lot of ways, I should have been more tense and more stressful because of, like, the stuff I was dealing with as a consequence of that coming to an end, like trying to figure out somewhere to live, trying to figure out, like, there were so many things that, I mean, and then I ended up in other situations which were not good for me, like multiples on the back of it. Like, should have been, like, technically speaking, I should have been in a bad way. And it was very interesting because Serena and I both get regular body work. And what was fascinating to me was in a situation which it was unfamiliar and super stressful, the whole being outside of the relationship thing, versus the familiarity that was also stressful, but it was that kind of low-key, constant underneath the surface because of the emotional abuse and manipulation that was happening. And it was fascinating because my body worker said to me, with what you're currently dealing with, like not having a place to live, not knowing where you're going to live, not knowing what country you're going to live in, like there was so much that was going on. He was like, logically, your body should be more tense and more jacked up than it is. And he was like, this is the most it is released in all the time that I've known you. And it was like, even when my brain wasn't aware, my body was aware. My body responded to what was going on. And I was like, well, isn't that interesting? Because I knew the relationship wasn't serving me. And I mean, as Serena knows, I was in the process of my exit strategy. I was trying to figure out the steps. It just ended up coming to a head before that point, before I figured out what those steps were and put the plan in place that meant that it would have been a smooth transition. So it wasn't like I was like devastated. This was like the person I thought I was supposed to be with. Absolutely not. But even though I didn't realize the impact it was having on me on a day-to-day basis, my body still did. So even like if you're noticing like there's tension in your, like physically feeling tension in a way that you don't really usually feel, that also can be like an indicator of like, there's something about this that isn't right. Like if you are like you're bracing yourself against impact, even if that you're bracing against emotional impact or energetic impact as opposed to actual physical impact, that's also an indicator that you're probably in a supportive discomfort an unsupportive discomfort space. And so and I think Serena made a really good point earlier where she said, the more that you practice getting into a supportive discomfort, the easier it is to notice the unsupportive discomfort, because it does feel different. It has a different quality to it. And you notice the disconnect between your brain and your being. Because like when we're talking about supportive discomfort, like if we're talking about like an area of learning and growth, we know mentally it's going to serve us to do this. And our body is just reacting to the fear of our needs being compromised or the uncertainty of what's to go ahead. But we know that our needs won't really be compromised in a significant way. We're going to be okay. And also we can support ourselves through that. So even if our needs are compromised along the way, we can still take care of ourselves so that it's not really that big of a deal. But when we're in that place where it's that unsupportive discomfort that we need to get out of, it's like nothing about it. You can't settle in it. Like there's something about it that stops you from being able to properly relax. And when you start to notice that, and there's no like, I can't see why. And it's interesting because like, if you go back and look at the situation we were talking about, I think it was in 2 episodes ago, we were talking about the a conflict avoidance situation. We were talking about the friend that I went through that with. And I said, the interesting thing was between the first instance where there'd been problems, which they'd had issues with and hadn't spoken to me about, and the second, something significant happened in my life. I got my green card. And the night that I got my green card, I think Serena, I think you were sick. I don't think you were like available to come out. The person I was dating was working and wasn't able to be there. And I was just looking for somebody to come out, have a drink with me, and so I could celebrate. And I invited this person. And even in the moment I invited them, something was like, something doesn't feel right. And I said afterwards, I was disappointed because they were the first person who hugged me after I found out I got my green card. And it didn't feel right that was the case. Now, I had no clue consciously what was going on, but subconsciously I had obviously been picking up on signals that my conscious brain hadn't become aware of yet. And I was like, well, this is one of my friends. Why wouldn't I invite them out to celebrate? Like, it's an obvious choice for me. And then literally a month and a half later, everything blew up in my face. And I'm like, oh, that's why I was feeling that. Okay, noted. Learning for future. And that's the thing, that this is not a, like, you know it or you don't know it. It's not like you're here and you're done. It's like you kind of hone your senses on it. So it's like, as you go forward, every experience you have is like, that's another little bit of information in the bank to be like, oh, okay, so this can also mean that, and that can also mean this. Okay, so now it's this I'm looking for. And oh wait, that shows up. Oh, that's a really big sign. I need to definitely pay attention to that one. So like, and that's the thing, is like, this is a process that you learn and develop the more that you go on as you go through life. Like, the more that you practice this, the more you learn to engage with supportive discomfort, the more you get to encourage it and welcome it, because you realize it's so good for you and supportive of where you want to go. And therefore, the more that unsupportive discomfort reveals itself to you in that process, the better you can understand the difference. And the more you can understand the difference, very first thing that's going to happen, almost certainly, boundaries. That's the first thing you're going to want to do in this situation. Or you may just go, actually, I want to remove myself from this situation because there's an intensity around this. It feels like it's not even just a boundaries thing. Like, boundaries is like, okay, this is like, not great. Getting out of the situation is like, nope, this is a hard no. I don't know why, but my entire system is going, this isn't going to work for me. And so it's, as I said, it can be difficult to like trust it when it goes against our conditioning. But the truth of the matter is, the more that we can start to develop and hone that trust in the sense ourselves, the more we can start to recognize what it looks like, listen to it, trust it, and act on it, the better we're going to get at believing and understanding that our voice, our internal sense, is always going to be way more supportive for us than our conditioning. And so the more that we can learn to trust that, the more we are actually supporting our needs, because you're actually meeting your value need by doing that, because you're basically saying, what I sense, what I feel, what I'm what my gut is telling me is the most important thing to follow in this. And that's the thing that's going to guide me in the direction that I want to move in. Anything you want to add to this before we go forward?
I'm good.
So I know this is kind of an interesting topic, but I think that it's really important, especially when you kind of have been listening to that conditioning around, like, you've got to get comfortable with discomfort. Recognize when it's important to get comfortable with discomfort and when it is not, and when it is absolutely an indicator that this is not something you should get comfortable with. It's something you should get away from. Thank you for being here. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. We will be back next week with another episode. Between now and then, remember to stay safe, take care of yourself, and continue to meet your own needs. Lots of love. Bye.
Bye, friends.
That's it for today,
If you like what you heard, please subscribe, rate, and give us a written review.
as it will help more people find us.
And remember, getting comfortable with being uncomfortable is only applicable when we are talking about supportive discomfort. When we're talking about unsupportive discomfort, we want to learn to set boundaries, listen to what our gut is telling us, and if necessary, get ourselves out of the situation.
Well, shit. It really is that simple.